Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host for today, John Dehlin. It is February 28th, 2024, last day of February. And we are here today to what I think we're going to be doing is breaking some new historical ground. We're going to be answering the question, was the Book of Mormon, did the Book of Mormon inspire Abraham Lincoln to free the slaves and to influence his position both on God and America, and America as allegedly a covenant people, etc. And of course, the reason why we're covering this topic is because Tim Ballard, the former CEO of Operation Underground Railroad, before he got super famous about Operation Underground Railroad, he published several books about American history. One of them, I think the book is called The Lincoln Hypothesis. Yeah, The Lincoln Hypothesis. And, he's made a lot of money, and Deseret Book has made a lot of money selling the idea to Mormons that the Book of Mormon is so incredibly awesome and Joseph Smith is so incredibly awesome that they shaped the future and the history of American Civil War and Abraham Lincoln. And we're going to be bringing on today a face that will be familiar to all of you. We're bringing back Julia Sanders. Hey, Julia.
Hi.
Julia, you're the one I first learned about your research from your amazing TikTok. I think it's called Analyzing Mormonism, right?
Yeah. So when you'd said that, because this book, The Lincoln Hypothesis, was published in 2014. So that was 10 years ago. Has no one else done this type of research just to verify his facts?
I'm not aware of any. If somebody has, I know that Ben Park just hates Tim Ballard's history and is critical of it, but I don't know that anybody's ever
And he's a really good historian. So yeah. Huh. Okay.
Anyway, but you decided just as a I don't know, amateur historian. I guess I don't know if you consider yourself professional or not, but you decided to dig in.
Yeah, so I saw a clip on someone else's TikTok, and I was like, I know something about Abraham Lincoln because of all the John C. Bennett research, and I this can't be true, and so that's what produced all this research. So yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be showing your attempt at vetting this allegation, right?
Yeah.
Hypothesis.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anything you want to say before we jump in?
No, I don't know how books like this get published without having somebody verify things. I don't know. But
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to our first slide that you put together. And I think the first slide just kind of introduces the book. Do you want to introduce the book?
Yeah. So like I said, it was published in 2014. And so this is just the description on Amazon. So I'm just going to read it. So Abraham Lincoln became the 16th U.S. president during a very dark time in American history. Author Timothy Ballard explores the crucial role that President Lincoln played to bring this nation closer to heaven. Readers will see Lincoln as a man inspired of God who invoked a covenant relationship between America and its maker, not unlike the national covenants invoked by righteous leaders in the Book of Mormon. In addition, the Lincoln Hypothesis reveals documented evidence that Abraham Lincoln did, in fact, check out the Book of Mormon as he struggled with making some of the most critical decisions of his presidency. Did he read it? Did it influence him? Was the Book of Mormon a key factor in Lincoln's success and the healing of a nation?
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of hype, right?
Yeah.
And I guess to be fair at the outset, he's calling it a hypothesis. So does that his get out of jail free card before we actually show the receipts, Julia?
I think some things should not be hypothesized, and I think there's enough evidence to show that this is one of those things.
Yeah, we're gonna blow that hypothesis out of the water. I did want to make sure we show this. This is a slide that we used when the church issued its condemnation of Tim Ballard, but it showed at the time that the church issued its condemnation of Tim Ballard for being, I don't know, my memory is something like morally dubious or morally suspect. It was selling something, I don't know, this slide shows something like 12 books being sold by Tim Ballard. And one of them at the bottom right, you'll see the Lincoln hypothesis as one of the books. So, one of the things I think Tim Ballard wanted to make sure everybody know when he was denying that the church had condemned him is how much money Deseret Book had made off of his books. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to show, like, for all the, like, none of my books would ever be sold at Deseret Books. Clearly they have a vetting process. I don't have a book, by the way, but clearly Deseret Book has a vetting process. And today we're gonna maybe show how thorough that vetting process is or is not. All right, Julia. So should we show the first video just to kind of set the stage for his claim?
Yeah, so just to set the video up, so this is from, I think it's from the Nephite Explorer, if I remember correctly. And I remember watching this as a member of the church, or as an active member of the church. And so this man is going around and he's like showing evidence for the Book of Mormon and things like that. So here he's interviewing Tim Ballard in his younger years. I guess this was like 10 years ago when it first came out. And Tim Ballard is explaining his book. So then we can watch the video.
And I think viewers are letting me know that it's a leap year, so I think this is February. I think so. Thanks to whoever it is in the comments that's reminding me that this is not, in fact, the last day of February. All right. So let's go ahead and roll this video of a much younger Tim Ballard. Here we go.
Than what took place in the middle of the Civil War. What happened in that time frame that changed this man's thinking?
Abraham Lincoln, right during this time, this process of crystallization, he checked out a book from the Library of Congress. This book is significant for several reasons. One is that he was only supposed to have it for 2 weeks, and he kept it for 8 months. It's also significant because he turned it back into the Library of Congress right at the end of what we know was his process of crystallization. He turned it in just days after he issued his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet, as if to say, perhaps, okay, I've learned something from this, okay? And the other reason is this book. What's in this book? It's a book that's an account of an ancient people who lived here in the Americas and lived under a covenant likened to the covenants of ancient Israel. And they called this land a promised land, and righteous, when the people were righteous, the Lord blessed them. When they were not righteous, they were cursed, and awful things happened. It's a story that looks a lot like the Civil War. Now, the book he had, as controversial as this might be for people, was the Book of Mormon. Now, I'm not saying at all that Abraham Lincoln believed that it was some kind of any kind of truth, or that he thought it was a book of scripture from God. But I do know he had the book, and Lincoln didn't check out books to not read them. He read more. He was probably our most avid reader as a president. Fact or fiction? The Book of Mormon tells a story of a promised land, and it tells the answer to a calamity like a civil war, and that is the nation turns to God. Did Lincoln read this book and glean some idea? Did it at least inspire in his head that maybe I'm living in a promised land after all? Likely. Because from that point on, after he issues that Emancipation Proclamation, he starts sounding a lot like the prophets that are reported to be prophets in the Book of Mormon, and he starts sounding like the prophets of the Old Testament. Like a prophet presiding over a promised land.
Well, thank God. You're already laughing. I can see you laughing, Julia. Really quickly, I want to thank everyone for joining us on the live stream. And whether you're watching on the live stream or not, please do like this episode and subscribe to the channel if you're not. That really helps us with YouTube and the algorithms. And of course, we always thank our donors who donate at mormonstories.org and become monthly donors, because we couldn't do this without you. Okay, so Julia, what was making you laugh at that?
Well, so many things. Like we'll talk about a lot of things, but like just like he's setting it up. So Abraham Lincoln had the book for 8 months, and then he turns it in, and then like he says days later he writes this Emancipation Proclamation, which was inspired. He sounds like a prophet of God. I guess I laugh because I don't know. We can talk about it too. Like, I don't know if he's read the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't know.
I mean, there's ethics here because number one, he's making money off the book. Number two, he makes money off of like tours of like going around and, or at least in the past, leading people on historical tours back east. And then Deseret Books making money off of this book. So there are ethics here in terms of historical, credibility, telling people inspiring things if they aren't backed up by the evidence. Really quickly, I want to talk about this claim that Lincoln was going through a process of crystallization. I watched a couple videos in prep for this interview, and he likes to tell this story of like, I think he had a child die, and that sort of according to Ballard, that puts Lincoln into like this dark night of the soul because one of his family members dies. And so then he like has like a domestic, helper helping him, and like some family members of hers had died. And so he asks her where she gets her faith. And then she says, from God. And then Lincoln's like, well, tell me about your God. And he basically recounts this sort of idea that Lincoln had a crisis of faith because of the death of a family member, and that's what made him turn to the Book of Mormon. I don't expect you to know if there's any truth to any of that, but you probably heard that, right? Or did you not?
I have heard that. I have heard that before. Now that you're saying it, I don't know a lot of history of Abraham Lincoln. I just know. So I did a lot of research on this specific topic of the Library of Congress and things like that. And these other books that were checked out. I don't know very much about Lincoln's personal life. I just know that he did not like the Mormons. So
we'll get to that.
Right.
Okay. The only other thing, it's so funny to hear him talking about, the Nephite covenant and America being a promised land when we know that the Book of Mormon is super racist, that it's got the Nephites being white-skinned and the Lamanites being dark-skinned. And then he says it's likely in that video, that the Book of Mormon persuaded Lincoln to view America as a promised land. And I thought that was a stretch.
Yeah, I don't. And just full disclosure, I have not read the Lincoln Hypothesis. I just, so I don't know.
We do need to preserve our brain cells. All right, what's this next clip we're going to be showing?
So this next one is from Mormon Book Reviews. It's Stephen Pinecker. I loved his Mormon Stories episodes, and he brings on Rod Meldrum. And Rod Meldrum, there's just a little section where Rod is talking about the Lincoln Hypothesis, and then he's giving his take on the book as well. So,
all right, shout out to Stephen Pinecker, and let's roll the clip.
And it was about that same time when Tim was still working for the Homeland. I think it was the Department of Homeland Security, if I remember correctly. And he wrote another book called the Lincoln Hypothesis, which was just fascinating. I knew that Joseph Smith and Abraham Lincoln were contemporaries of each other, but I didn't know if they had actually ever met or if they even knew about each other. And Tim gives a pretty good, pretty powerful information that they may not only have known about each other, but that actually the Book of Mormon played an important role in U.S. history again, as Abraham Lincoln went out and actually checked out a copy of the Book of Mormon from the Library of Congress, had it for almost 6 months, and then right after he just came out with the Emancipation Proclamation, he then 2 weeks later, after he came out with the Emancipation Proclamation, where he basically went to his cabinet, he says, basically that slavery has not been the purpose of this war, but it is now. And he said this is what God has called me to make this war a lot more about slavery, and they said, and his cabinet said, if you do this, if you come out with this Emancipation Proclamation, you're going to be killed for this. And he said, this is what we're going to do. He says, this is the will of God, and by God we're going to do this. He had just read the Book of Mormon and the parts about this covenant with God between the United States and God, or I should say America, basically the promised land and God. And that gave him the strength to move forward with the war. And actually from that point on, it's a fascinating book, tremendous research.
tremendous research. I mean, Rod Meldrum has always struck me as a nice guy. So I don't like to be critical of guys that are generally anyone who's generally nice, I guess, but that's so on brand for Rod Meldrum. And I think a lot of his followers to just grasp on a conspiracy theory that's actually contradicted by the evidence,
Right. Yeah. One of the
supported by evidence, right?
right. Yeah. One of the commenters said Mormons are a believing people, and like, and I was a Mormon, and I was very believing too. I just think that we cripple ourselves when we just take everything at face value, and without doing any research ourselves. So, yeah, I feel like that's where Rod is in this. Is he's just accepting what Tim Ballard has written because it supports his beliefs, specifically that the Book of Mormon took place here in the United States. So, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is just this assertion that like Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist, that he was down with slavery, I guess, or at least not opposed to it until he read the Book of Mormon. That's such a bold claim.
I know. And then like the purpose, he's talking about the purpose of the Civil War not being at first about slavery. I don't know where he's getting that idea.
I mean,
so,
yeah.
I don't know.
People that I don't know. A lot I studied political science, and the professor that I had who objected to the Civil War being framed about slavery wanted to frame it as being about business interests or economic interests, just to avoid having to confront the racism and the slavery issue altogether. And generally, these people are also opposed to the civil rights movement. So I'm just confused that such a bold claim is being made, and I'm sure there's strong evidence that it was not the Book of Mormon that converted Lincoln to an abolitionist sort of position.
Right.
Anyway.
And there's so many people held that position too. Like John C. Bennett, when he became the mayor, that was one of the first things he wanted to abolish slavery. And so like, I don't know. There's just a lot of people that were of that mindset without, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we've got your amazing research now that we've set this all up.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so I just wanted to set the stage a little bit with the relationship between the Mormons and Abraham Lincoln. So this is reported in the newspaper called the Quincy Whig on November 13th of 1840. And I don't want to read this whole thing, but what you'll see here is that 200 of the members of the church, 200 Mormons, erased Abraham Lincoln's name from the electoral ticket. And so it goes on to say the Quincy Whig speaks of the erasure of Mr. Lincoln's name as a trick played upon 200 Mormon voters. And so
now in 1840, Lincoln wasn't running for president, right? He would have been running for some state office, correct?
Right.
Okay. You know what the office that would have been?
I don't actually. I should, but I don't.
Maybe a member of Congress or something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But the Mormons, according to this article in the Quincy Whig, and Quincy is a city near Nauvoo, correct?
Right.
Yeah, and it's basically alleging shenanigans with the Mormons, ballot tampering. Is that what this is?
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the next slide explains it's John C. Bennett. He's giving his explanation as the mayor of Nauvoo. He's giving his explanation as to why they did that.
Okay. All right. There it is.
Yeah. So in the Times and Seasons, this was published on January 1st of 1841. He gives his explanation. He says that they erased his name. Not, however, on account of any dislike to him as a man, but simply because he was the last name on the ticket. And we desire to show our friendship to the Democratic Party by substituting the name of this other person for some one of the Whigs.
Yeah.
And then he comes up and he's like, oh, and when I was getting the Nauvoo City Charter passed, Abraham Lincoln came up to me and congratulated me on its passage, even though nobody read it. Anyway, so he's like, we don't dislike him. We just needed to erase his name and put another name. So
that's so shady. And by the way, when you read like No Man Knows My History and you learn about why people wanted to kill Joseph Smith, which of course we don't condone murder or lynching here, but part of it was these election shenanigans that Joseph Smith was involved in, of promising votes to one candidate, but then switching at the last minute. And this sort of election shenanigans that got public officials kind of angry.
Yeah, the political power in Nauvoo was a big push for his assassination.
And I'd say the misuse of political power.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anything else about that last slide before we go to the next one? So this,
No, I think that was good.
because they didn't want his name to show up last on the ballot.
Well, his name was, so you have the list of names and his was the last. So they just erased it and then added the Democratic person or the Whig person, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then the next slide shows this other book that was published. So the book is called 50 Years in the Church of Rome. And it was published in 1886 and it was written by Charles, and I'm going to butcher his name, Chiniquy.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's quoting Abraham Lincoln. This is a conversation that he's remembering from June 9th of 1864. I don't know how that, so it is a later date. It's a later source, but Abraham.
Oh, well,
yeah.
22 years later.
Right.
Okay.
So he quotes Abraham Lincoln as saying, there are two cankers are biting the very entrails of the United States today, the Romish and the Mormon priests.
I think is Romish meaning like the Catholics, the
I think so.
Church, the influence of the Catholic Church?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, keep going.
And the Mormon priests, both are quietly at work to form a people of the most abject, ignorant, and fanatical slaves, who will recognize no other authority but their supreme pontiffs. Both are aiming at the destruction of our schools, to raise themselves upon our ruins. Both shelter themselves under our grand and holy principles of liberty of conscience, to destroy that very liberty of conscience, to bind the world before their heavy and ominous yoke. The Mormon and the Jesuit priests are equally the uncompromising enemies of our Constitution and our laws. And so, yeah, I don't know if we need to read this whole thing, but so he's calling them a canker. He's saying that they're aiming to destroy the schools, and he just keeps going on. There's just really negative opinion of the members of the church.
Oh, and it's called Church of Rome. So yeah, clearly this father Chiniquy is basically saying that Lincoln felt like the Mormons and the Catholics had a bad influence on the citizenship, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So right there, you're seeing another, or I guess you're seeing, maybe it's for the first time, but Abraham Lincoln does not like the members of the church. So to say that he was inspired by the Book of Mormon is a different thing. And Ballard did say, he's like, I'm not trying to say that he was converted by the teachings of the church. Clearly he wasn't. But anyway, I just wanted to make that point clear that Abraham Lincoln did not like the saints.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this anti-bigamy statute that we're going to talk about would be a good evidence of that as well.
Yeah, oh, yes.
All right. Well, let's go to, because it all comes back to polygamy, as we all know, as we're about to find out. Okay. So let's actually dig into what you found out from the Library of Congress.
Yeah. So
how you gathered these documents, like what the process was for you to actually do your research?
Yeah, so there's a blog that I think it's called Britannica. The Library of Congress has a blog. And so you'll see, because they've had this question posed to them before of whether Abraham Lincoln did actually read the Book of Mormon because of this. I don't know if it's because of Tim Ballard's book, but you can go to their blog and you'll see they have this huge post and they show these little photographs of what I'm about to show. And so that's where most of that's coming from. And then I emailed the Library of Congress to get specific pictures and they responded. So yeah, so that's...
we'll ask Maven maybe in the show notes to include a link to that. So this is what you're about to show us is an image that you got from the Library of Congress, or is it from the blog?
It's just directly on the blog. It's just you can click on the link and it'll take you straight to it. So
okay, good. We'll include a link to that so people can reference it. Maybe we'll paste that right now into the comments. Okay, keep going. Sure.
Okay, so you'll see Abraham Lincoln's name is at the top of the page, and staff could check out books under the representative's name. And so in the blog it says this borrowing lodge or ledger from 1861 was for congressional representatives and executive branch members, essentially only those who were allowed to borrow books from the Library of Congress. And then it says each page is dedicated to a different representative with their names written at the top. So if that makes sense, so Abraham Lincoln's name was at the top, so he could check out books.
Where in that page is Abraham Lincoln's name? I'm having a hard time reading it.
Oh, sorry. It's at the very, very top. So you'll see that big bold line. And then right above it, there's this little...
that handwriting?
Yeah, the handwriting. That's Abraham. That's Abraham's name.
President
A. Lincoln President is what I'm seeing. U.S.
Got it. Okay, thanks. My eyes are bad. So.
Oh, you're totally fine.
Okay, so this is a log used to write down books that are being borrowed.
Right, and it could be borrowed by the president, by any of the staff, so it doesn't have to be him specifically. That point needs to be very clear. Is that it doesn't we don't know if it was Lincoln specifically. It could have been anyone on his staff.
So maybe even cabinet members?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We don't know who
Okay.
checked that book out, but it was checked out under his name.
Okay. All right. So that's step one. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So if you'll go to that spot, it'll show you the list of books that were checked out on November 18th of 1861. And again, it's hard to read. So if you'll go to the next slide, I just typed up what it says.
Okay. So this is just a bunch of books with like the name, the date, and the book, basically, right?
Right. Yeah. And it shows you like when it's due and things like that.
Okay.
So this is me. I'm having typed it all up. So you'll see there was 1, 2, 3, 4 books checked out on November 18th. And the top one, I kind of feel like it might have been checked out the day before, just of how it's written, but because it says volume 3 and it's referencing the book above it on the list. So at least these 3 books were checked out on November 18th. And so you'll see, so Gunnison's Mormonism, Hyde's Mormonism, the Book of Mormon, and then 4 days later, they checked out somebody checked out the U.S. Constitution, Volume 8 of 1783, and also Volume 8 of a different year of 1856, and then Mormonism in All Ages, and then Mormons or Latter-day Saints. So several books are being checked out, not just the Book of Mormon. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different books concerning the topic of Mormonism that are being checked out within a matter of days of each other.
Okay, a bunch of Mormon books, not just the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, not just the Book of Mormon.
Okay, and let's. I think now we're going to talk about what those other books were. Yeah,
right. It's very important that you see this in context of it's not just if it was just the Book of Mormon that he checked out, maybe it'd be different. But he's checking out whoever's checking these books out checks out a whole pile of them on this topic.
Okay.
So the first one that was listed was J.W. Gunnison's The Mormons or the Latter-day Saints. And all these books are available on archive.org. You can just see the whole book there on archives. And so we can link those in the show notes too.
And by the way, this book I've been digging into, it's quite interesting. I'm finding some really interesting things in it. I've been sharing those with you.
Yeah, those are really cool. Like I'm hoping to publish all these again so that people can have them. So this one was published in 1856. And the topics that were covered in this book, you have polygamy and this. So the Mormons were outspoken about their polygamy in 1852. That's when they announced that they were living it. So this book was published just 4 years later. So that's why that's included in there. So yeah, we have, polygamy, treasure digging, gold plates in a hat, which I thought was funny. The person, whoever's writing it, didn't quite understand that it was the seer stones in the hat, not the whole book in the hat. They talk about the destruction of the Nauvoo expositor, and then they talk about the temple ceilings. And so just those are some things. And then for me in my Mormon brain, I would see this book as an anti-Mormon book.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's saying things that are not, they're like exposing the temple ceilings. They're talking about different things and like just anti-Mormon topics. So definitely not faith affirming.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next book.
Okay. Yeah. So then you have John Hyde Jr.'s book, Mormonism, Its Leaders and Designs. And this was published in 1857. And the topics covered in this book are polygamy, and they specifically call it anti-Mormon to the fact that they're living polygamy, which I thought was so interesting. And that's an important piece that we're talking about today.
Mormons are saying that it's anti-Mormon to say that Mormons are practicing polygamy?
The writer of this book is saying that the fact that Mormons are living polygamy is anti-Mormon. And we'll talk about that too, because
so he's a believing Mormon that thinks polygamy was apostasy?
I think I don't know that John Hyde is a Mormon, but I think he's saying the Book of Mormon says you shouldn't live polygamy, and they're living polygamy. So it's anti-Mormon.
The title says John Hyde Jr., formerly a Mormon elder and resident of Salt Lake City.
Oh, that's a good point. So, and I'll have to look at that one and see if he's a believer, but or even jump to that page. So,
okay. Well, it's formerly a Mormon elder, so that's interesting. All right, keep going.
Yeah, so polygamy's covered, treasure digging's covered, the Kinderhook plates are covered, which is a topic I didn't even learn about until I left the church. The seer stone in the hat, why the witnesses could have been motivated to lie about seeing the plates, and the temple stealing ceremonies. He's exposing them in this book. So again, this is another anti-Mormon book. It's not faith affirming at all.
Okay, that's down. Okay.
Yeah, and then the third one on the list that's concerning the topic of Mormonism was the Book of Mormon. So I just threw that site in there to show that.
And you have published in 1830, but this is the third edition, which I think was printed in 1840. Is that right?
Yeah, the Library of Congress, the one that they have is the third edition. This one right here. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But again, they don't know the Library of Congress doesn't know that the copy that they have is actually the copy that was checked out under Abraham Lincoln's name. So they're not sure. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later too. So, okay. So the next, so you've got the 2 anti-Mormon books, the Book of Mormon, and then you have this third anti-Mormon book. This one's J.B. Turner, Mormonism in All Ages. And the topics covered in this book are the stone spectacles, the seer stones, just in general, and that Mormons believed in a trinity, which I thought was really interesting, and the Solomon Spalding theory. And the reason, just to point out, this book was published in 1842, and polygamy hadn't risen to its height yet. And of course, the Mormons, they didn't come out that they were openly living polygamy until 1852. And so those topics are not covered in this book. And even John C. Bennett's book hadn't even been released yet, him exposing Joseph's living polygamy. So that's not in this book at all because nobody knew about it. So.
Okay. So that's three anti-Mormon books in the Book of Mormon, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm holding out hope that book is going to be pro-Mormon in some way, right? Faithful, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this next one is by Henry Mayhew, and it's called Mormons or Latter-day Saints. And the topics covered in this book are polygamy, money digging, kinderhook plates, the destruction of the novel expositor, the Spalding theory, and the temple ceilings and the rituals involved. So, so I would call this not faith affirming. So I would call it anti-Mormon as well. So
5 Mormon books were checked out, 4 were anti-Mormon books, and then the Book of Mormon.
Right.
I mean, that's really a great find, and it's really important, but just spell it out. Okay. So you've got this next slide.
I have a slide just to be really, really clear.
Okay.
So 5, like you said, 5 Mormon books were checked out. They're right there next to the Book of Mormon. They're right there on the list. I don't know how Tim Ballard overlooked that, but so 4 of them are anti-Mormon, and then you have the Book of Mormon, which of course is their book of scripture.
Now, was this point made in the blog post?
No, the blog post wasn't gearing towards Tim Ballard at all. So I had to look and see which books they were, and I had to go and track them down on archive.org. So
yeah, so this is an amazing slide, and maybe Ballard didn't know, right?
I don't know how, because he says that there's documented evidence that he checked out the Book of Mormon. It's right there. All the other anti-books are right there with it, like you saw in the other slides. Like I don't know how he overlooked that.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So what's the next slide? This is good.
Okay, so this is from the website. You can just go in and look. This is right on their blog. And so it says, this is from the Library of Congress blog. The library's copy of the 3rd edition of the Book of Mormon contains only a single annotation, a pencil mark along a few passages of the Book of Jacob, the 3rd of 15 books. Although Abraham Lincoln did sometimes use a pencil while reading, library staff cannot say with any certainty that Lincoln drew this line.
Okay, really quickly, those who are geeks in Mormonism know that there's a very important little passage in Jacob that should be sticking out to us right now, especially in the context of 4 other anti-Mormon books that all mention polygamy, right?
Right.
and that's the Jacob passage on polygamy, right?
And Jacob's a big book. Like he talks about the olive tree allegory. It's a big book, and just a tiny section about we don't believe in polygamy. And
all right, let's go back, keep going.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we need to read this whole thing, but they point out during its time in the general collections, it was available for consultation by all library users, many of whom would have also used pencils and could have marked the text. So again, they're saying we do not know if Abraham Lincoln made this marking. We just don't know that. So
right. But we know what passages marked for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that it's the 1840 edition of the Book of Mormon, which is the edition that likely Lincoln would have had.
Yeah, it seems like to me, it seems like that's what would be the case. So it's that they still have it.
Plausible that this was the Book of Mormon that Lincoln or one of his staff members would have had access to. We just can't say for sure. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, that's fair. This could have very well be the exact same copy that it was checked out under Lincoln's name. He sometimes marked in pencil. This book is still there and it has pencil markings. So yes, you could point to this is absolutely the book that Lincoln read, or you could say we don't know for sure because this could be a different copy. Anyone could have marked the pencil, and it could have been one of Lincoln's staff that read it and not Lincoln itself. So both sides are valid. So
okay. All right. So this is you got an email.
Yeah. So I was really curious because I was like, wouldn't it be really funny if what was marked was that one passage in the Book of Jacob that says we don't live polygamy. So I got the blog and I emailed them. I said, hey, I'm really curious. I'm doing a lot of research, and can you point me what was marked in the Book of Jacob? And they're like, oh yeah. So yeah, and then this is their response to me. This is their email back to me. So yeah. So it says, Dear Julia, thank you for your query on the Library of Congress blog. I don't even know how to say that. Bibliomania. So that's the name of the blog. I said it wrong, incorrectly. So the annotation is actually not underlining, but a light pencil mark in the margins on pages 124 and 125, which is in the second chapter of the Book of Jacob. So ding, ding, second chapter, starting in the middle of the 5th paragraph. And then again, they reiterate it is highly unlikely that it was made by Abraham Lincoln. And then later it says, we are not sure if this copy of the 3rd edition was owned by the Library of Congress in 1861. So that copy borrowed by the White House may have been a different copy than the Library of Congress that they know that the Library of Congress no longer owns. So they're just saying we don't know for sure. So take all this with a grain of salt. So yeah. So and then they said I've included pictures of these markings just for your benefit. So I really appreciate that. So
here is the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, so this is Book of Jacob. So you'll see pencil markings. They're really hard to see, but in the margins of the page, there's like a big line down the sides. And then on the other side, there's a small little mark. So and these are all in the Book of Jacob in the second chapter.
Yeah. And as I'm reading it, I think it's I'm just reading it here, and it says, and now I make an end of speaking unto you concerning this pride, and were it not that I must speak unto you concerning a grosser crime, my heart would rejoice exceedingly because of you. But the word of God burthens. This is where the old versions of the Book of Mormon still have editorial problems. Burthens me because of your grosser crimes. And by the way, there's no chapters or verses here in this version of the Book of Mormon. It says, for behold, thus saith the Lord, this people begin to wax in iniquity. They understand not the scriptures, for they seek to excuse themselves in committing whoredoms because of the things which were written concerning David and Solomon, his son. Behold, David and Solomon truly had many wives and concubines, which thing was abominable before me, saith the Lord. Wherefore, thus saith the Lord, I have led this people forth out of the land of Jerusalem by the power of mine arm, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say, wherefore, my brethren, hear me and hearken to the word of the Lord, for there shall not any man among you have, save it be one wife, and concubines he shall have none. For I, the Lord God, delighteth in the chastity of women, and whoredoms are an abomination before me. Thus saith the Lord of hosts. Wherefore the people shall keep my commandments. And then it goes on to say, for if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people. Otherwise they shall hearken unto these things. So that's the Book of Mormon condemning polygamy as a whoredom.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you read that, because that's really strong language. A grosser crime, it's a whoredom, like just so many bad, like heavy words that are saying this is so bad. We believe in only having one wife, concubines he shall have none. And then they get that the little add-in where it's like, well, if God commands it, then it's okay. But
if I want to feed, which means polygamy needs to have offspring,
right?
Legitimate, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. And so you had a second slide. I don't know if
yeah, I just wanted to point out because the markings are in the margins mostly, but there's that one, the part if you go back to where it says, for there shall not any man among you have save it be one wife, and concubines he shall have none. The pencil marking has crossed out the word none, which again, we don't know if this is Lincoln who's doing that, but I just think that was really interesting. Like the person is like emphasizing they should not have concubines or extramarital or extra marriages. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I just thought that was interesting. I just wanted to point out that in the text itself, it's been marked as well.
And you're saying in the slide, it's unlikely that these markings are from Lincoln.
That's just me. That's just me reiterating what the Library of Congress person has told me. So,
not necessarily unlikely, but there's just no evidence, right?
Right. We don't know. So yeah, so unlikely is probably the wrong word. It's just we just don't know.
Okay. Okay. So now we've established, number one, it's clear that they were concerned about problems. Whoever was doing this research in 1862 was clearly concerned about problems with the Mormon Church. It wasn't some faith exploration to buttress their testimony or to gain inspiration about America being a chosen land under covenant from God. We're pretty sure that's not what was going on here. And we're pretty sure that they were probably interested in this issue of polygamy. And now this is when the year 1862 just becomes crystal clear when you look at the history books and what was also going on in 1862. So take it, Julia.
Yes. So this next slide is about the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act, and this was written into law on July 1st of 1862. And so I just want to read a little bit of it. So it's this is section 2 of the act. It says, "And be it further enacted that the following ordinance of the provincial government of the state of Deseret," so that's Utah, "so called, namely, an ordinance incorporating the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, passed February 8th in the year 1851, and adopted, reenacted, and made valid by the government and legislative assembly of the territory of Utah, to annul all acts and laws which establish, maintain, protect, or countenance the practice of polygamy, evasively called spiritual marriage, however disguised by legal or ecclesiastical solemnities, sacraments, ceremonies, consecrations, or other contrivances? Contrivances. Okay.
So clearly, Congress is, Brigham Young is by 1862, after lying that they've been practicing polygamy for well over a decade, hiding it, misleading converts from Europe, etc. At some point, what year did you put on Brigham Young finally publicly admitting that he was practicing polygamy?
52.
52.
So 10 years earlier.
So Congress has had 10 years to fester and be worried about polygamy. I'm sure they're wondering whether they want to. There's increasing interest in incorporating Western territories as states into the United States. And so by 10 years after Brigham Young admitting that polygamy was being practiced, Congress is passing what's called the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act. And for those who don't know, bigamy is another way of saying polygamy. I think it's just referencing two wives instead of multiple wives. Is that right, Julia?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's aimed directly at the church. They say an ordinance incorporating the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they're like, and I also think it's really interesting, this language at the bottom where it says, they call it spiritual marriage. It's disguised by ecclesiastical solemnities, sacraments, ceremonies. And those 4 other books that were checked out I think almost all of them talk about the temple ceremonies and things like that, the sealing ordinances. And so whoever checked those books out, it seems to me that they were interested in the Mormon marriages in the temples and how they're getting around that legally.
And that's interesting. For those who haven't checked out our LDS discussion series, we talked about William Law recently and how William Law was excommunicated for, quote, spiritual wifery, which was this weird usage of language to try and differentiate whatever crazy sex.
With John C. Bennett.
Sorry, did I see William Law?
Yeah.
So yeah, in our John C. Bennett episodes, you and Nemo and LDS discussions talked about how John C. Bennett was excommunicated for, quote, spiritual wifery, and how that was a weird usage of language to try and distinguish John C. Bennett's crazy sexual behaviors from Joseph Smith's. But what we learned from these books is that the Mormons actually used this idea of spiritual marriage or spiritual wifery as a way to deceive people later and to almost throw them off the trail of polygamy by saying there's no spiritual wifery going on here. That's some of the stuff that I read. What's interesting about that to you, Julia?
No, yeah, that's great. So it just seems like in this Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act, they're trying to encompass everything. Whatever the church is doing, whatever the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is doing to make polygamy okay, however they're disguising it, that's wrong, and it needs to stop.
Cut that stuff out.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So it's clear that the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act was being worked on and was passed that very same year that those 5 books were checked out, including the Book of Mormon.
Yes. And then if you go to the next slides, I put that like into a clearer image.
There we go.
Yeah. So just to be super clear, the Book of Mormon was checked out on November 18th of 1861 and returned 8 months later on July 24th of 1862. And then so 1 week later, after the Book of Mormon was returned to the Library of Congress, President Lincoln signed the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act into law.
Okay, so if I'm remembering right, Ballard wants to say that the important dates are the checking out or returning of the Book of Mormon with Lincoln's giving of the issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. Is that right?
Yeah. So,
but that's not the important date once you have the
right. So to me, it seems way more likely that Lincoln was these books were checked out for the Anti-Morrill Bigamy Act and not the Emancipation Proclamation, which doesn't even happen until a year later.
Okay. So I don't mean to steal your thunder. All right.
Oh no, you're totally fine.
So the next slide, tell us about that. Oh, wait.
Okay. So
did we make those points? I was worried that I was stealing your thunder by.
Oh no, you're totally fine. Yeah, just that this act was being written while this Book of Mormon, or shortly after the Book of Mormon was returned to the Library of Congress, and so it was returned July 24th, and it was. I think I maybe got that slide wrong a tiny bit. So I think so the Book of Mormon is returned, and then a week earlier it's signed into law, right? So it was signed into law. What was it, July 1st?
Yeah, and I think you've got it on a different slide, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. So sorry if I got the dates a little bit wrong. It's just they're just within weeks of each other. The Book of Mormon being returned.
It was checked out in advance for people around Lincoln to be able to understand this Mormon question, and then once the law is passed, either a week before or a week after, it's all returned because now they don't need those Books of Mormons anymore.
That's what I think. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. So the next slide is slavery in Utah. Why are you wanting to talk about that?
Yeah. So the Emancipation Proclamation is about slavery. So I wanted to just have us understand where the Mormons stood and where Utah stood as far as slavery right now, because I don't know. We'll just get to it too. So let's talk about slavery for a second in Utah in this year.
Okay. All right. Let's do it.
Okay, so this is according to the historian Andre Resendez. So he says that Brigham Young officially legalized indigenous American slavery in the Utah Territory in 1852. So the same year that he announces that they live polygamy. And he says that each person is allowed to own this native person up to 20 years, and then they would be released. And even, I don't know if we want to go into all the details, but there was a young girl. She was only 7. And she was purchased or traded, I guess. I think the wife traded a gun for her by one of Brigham's wives. So in his own home, there's a slave, this little girl who stays with them for a long time. And so just how close slavery is to the Mormon prophet and to the leader of Utah is right in his home. So I just want to make that really clear too.
And some have tried to advance the theory to me that Brigham Young actually made at least one Native American woman his polygamous wife, and I haven't.
I was just researching this as well, because on one of the censuses it lists this girl, and I can't say her name, I can't pronounce her name, but he can't pronounce it either, so he names her Sally.
Kapaputs or something.
Kapaputs.
Yeah.
So in one of the censuses, they name her the 57th wife.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This could be her. We don't know.
Okay.
And so Mormons introduced slavery, so there's 2 different types of slavery. You have black slavery and you have indigenous slavery. So the Mormons introduced slavery into the Utah Territory with individuals such as Greenflake, Harkley Wales, and Oscar Crosby, who were brought in as slaves. And then Brigham Young held, and you'll find this throughout Mormon history, but specifically this quote comes from the Journal of Discourses, Volume 2. He held that blacks should be used as servants. And according to an 1850 census, there were a total of 26 black slaves. And in the 1860 census, there were a total of 29 slaves. However, many have pushed against these numbers because there were places in Utah, such as Bountiful, where slaves were not counted on the census. And so we don't really know how many slaves there were in the Utah Territory. And then in 1857, it is estimated, there was at least 3 different scholars who pointed this out. It was estimated that there were 400 indigenous slaves in Utah in 1857.
And I'll just note, people don't... people of color, black people don't like to be called blacks. So we're quoting,
Oh, okay.
just so people know, we're quoting, we want to make
Well,
sure.
so some of those are my words because the word that they used, I don't use that. I don't like that other word.
Oh, okay.
So this was out of respect. And if this is still not respectful, I apologize.
Oh, no, it's good. I wasn't calling you out.
Either way, I don't mean any disrespect. So.
Okay. So I think the point you're making there is, tell me if well, do you want to say what your point is on showing that slide?
My point is that the Mormons believed in slavery, that their Mormon prophet has slaves in his home. This was not something that I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the Mormons have the Book of Mormon. The members of the church believe very strongly in the Book of Mormon, and they were not inspired themselves to end slavery. They brought it in, they put it into law. I just don't see how Abraham Lincoln could have been inspired by the Book of Mormon, having the Book of Mormon for only 8 months. He somehow was inspired by the Book of Mormon to end slavery. But the Mormons who have had it for 30 years now have never received that inspiration. So like, where is Tim Ballard getting any of these ideas?
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And the point I was going to make is it's really irresponsible for Tim Ballard to give the impression that Joseph Smith and the Mormons were anti-slavery, when not only, this evidence with Brigham Young in the Utah Territories is super relevant, but even Joseph Smith flip-flopped on the issue. It's almost like he took the position on slavery of whatever was beneficial, depending on whether he lived in Illinois or Missouri or, wherever. He was inconsistent.
He was, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't until he ran for president that he kind of changed his mind about that.
Yeah, and again, he was running from Illinois, and that's more of a northern state. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a great point to bring out. Okay, so we've got the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863.
Yeah, so I just want to read some of the language of the Emancipation Proclamation. So it was put into law January 1st of 1863, and it says that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within the state or designated part of the state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then henceforth and forever free. And I won't read the whole thing, but if you read the entire thing, nowhere does it have any language from the Book of Mormon at all. Like, there's just nothing in there, and I don't even think it says anything about any land of promise or any of those words that Tim Ballard was using at the beginning to describe it. I don't remember what else he says.
Well,
but he doesn't.
The Book of Mormon has the word "the," and it has the word "and" several times, and it has the word "free." So I mean,
well, and then like in the Emancipation Proclamation, he talks a little bit about God, but just one sentence of it. But like, there's nothing else in there that reflects anything about the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
So
I'm just totally being silly.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. I'm just floored that he thinks that this came from the Book of Mormon.
And then he tells people that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wrote a whole book about it. So.
Yeah. All right. So what's the next slide?
So this is just more of the same. So also before writing the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, and that came out on September 22nd of 1862. And so again, this is long after the Book of Mormon, 2 months after the Book of Mormon was returned to the Library of Congress. This is starting to be worked. So he releases this one, and then also Tim Ballard in his little spiel that we watched at the beginning, he says that the Book of Mormon was turned in days later, but in reality it was 2 months later. So he turns the Book of Mormon in, and 2 months later, the Emancipation Proclamation is written into law. Okay. Or this September, no, sorry, excuse me, the draft basically of the Emancipation Proclamation was written and issued.
So not only does he ignore other important events that occurred right around the turning into the Book of Mormon, but he gets the date wrong on the Emancipation Proclamation. Was tied to Abraham Lincoln's alleged checking out and reading of the Book of Mormon.
Right. So Lincoln or whoever checked it out, they turn it in, and then 2 months later, this draft of the Emancipation Proclamation comes out, and then 5 months later in January is it actually written into law. So it's not days. I don't know where he's getting that idea. Maybe he was just on the spot and couldn't remember, but 5 months is very different than.
And then here's the timeline. Here's the timeline to make it really clear, right?
Yes, yeah. So just to be super, super clear. So the Book of Mormon was checked out November 18th of 1861 and returned to July 24th of 1862. And like I just said, the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was issued on September 22nd, and the Book of Mormon was returned 2 months earlier. And the Emancipation Proclamation was written January 1st of 1863, and the Book of Mormon was returned 5 months earlier. And so the Book of Mormon had long been returned to the Library of Congress during the drafting of these two documents, but it was not. And I should have added the Anti-Morrill Bigamy Act was written and put into law during the time that the Book of Mormon was checked out, those 8 months. So
yeah, that should be added to the slide.
Right, for sure.
The date of the, let's go back. Is that on that slide? July 1st, 1862.
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually edit the slide.
Oh, that's really fine. I think I say it again in one of the other slides too.
Oh,
but yeah, for sure.
What are the next slides?
Well, like I kind of give another.
Oh, okay, there it is. All
right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's show that one.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. This is like I'm reiterating all of these things. I just want to make these really, really clear.
Hey,
so the Civil War begins in April. He checks out these books in November. 2 days later, or 4 days later,
of 1861.
1861, yeah. And then he checks out these two anti-books, and then the Book of Mormon. 4 days later,
between November 18th. I just want to slow down because people say,
"Oh yeah, oh sorry, I'm sorry, you guys. I talk really fast."
The Civil War begins in April of 1861. Right, a year, a year and a half into Lincoln's.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he would have been elected in 60 and started in 61. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
But Civil War begins in April 1861. In November of 1861, then three of those 5 books are checked out, including the Book of Mormon. And then in November 22nd, 4 days later, the other 2 anti-Mormon books. So 4 anti-Mormon books and the Book of Mormon are checked out in November of 1861. Okay, they take over.
Yeah, so then July 1st of 1862, the Anti-Morrill Bigamy Act is passed. And then I guess 20-something days later, on July 24th of 1862, the books are returned. And except for one of the books, I'm not sure why that one was held longer, but one of the books wasn't returned on the same day. And then you have September 22nd, the preliminary Emancipation Act was passed. And then January 1st of 1863.
So 2 months after the books are returned, a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was presented.
And then 5 months after the books are returned, the Emancipation Proclamation is issued. So, yeah, so I think it's very, very clear that the books were checked out for the purpose of the Anti-Morrill Bigamy Act and not for the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if we don't know for sure, just the evidence is overwhelming that your story, Julia, is much more likely than Tim Ballard's. And I'm sure Tim Ballard made hundreds of thousands of dollars off that book, right? And as our book. And those books sold well, as I understand it. So
yeah, I had family reading those books too. Like, and I don't know. It's just, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, Julia, this is amazing, groundbreaking research. And you're just getting started because you just started this semester your master's degree in history.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
So, this is just a sneak peek of what Julia is doing for us.
I guess I'm just still impressed that nobody else, or maybe they haven't, they just aren't on social media, but that no one's checked his facts.
You should publish this in the Journal of Mormon History, by the way.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, this could be your first publication. Seriously,
yeah.
I'm not kidding.
I don't know. I don't even know how to do that.
That's how you get jobs in tenure, as you publish.
Well, you should hook me up with whoever, and because that'd be really cool to publish this.
All right. Well, that's amazing research. And then, Julia, let's go ahead and just read the key takeaways.
Yeah, so the key takeaways. So Lincoln did not like the Mormons, and the Mormons did not like Lincoln. Lincoln was very much against slavery and polygamy, and the Mormons were for those things. I said, so the Mormons believed in slavery and polygamy. Again, they also believed in the Book of Mormon, and just this idea that Abraham Lincoln had it for 8 months and was so inspired to end slavery. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So another key takeaway is we have no idea if it was Lincoln who checked out the Book of Mormon. Just to be clear, we just don't know. It could be, but we don't know. The Book of Mormon was most likely checked out as a research for the 1862 Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act and not for Abraham Lincoln's spiritual explorations, which is what Tim Ballard was getting at. The best evidence for these facts is that that 4 anti-Mormon books were checked out alongside the Book of Mormon, which I think is a huge thing that Tim Ballard just leaves off completely. Tim Ballard's book is at best super poor scholarship, or at worst, and at worst, extremely disingenuous for Tim Ballard to suggest that Lincoln read the Book of Mormon as part of a spiritual quest, and that the Book of Mormon likely inspired his positions on slavery and the Civil War. This book should be edited or possibly removed from publication.
And those again, those last two bullets are mine.
Yeah, so
He's like,
yeah.
John, are you sure you want to be recommending that a book be taken off the shelves? And I'm like, I don't know, man. If it's like spreading misinformation, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is super fascinating, Julia. And hey, if we hurry and end now, we'll be done in less than 6
Oh, yay.
Yeah, really quickly, how do people follow your good work? Because I think you do great work. Your TikTok channel is amazing, and I want to
yeah, I'm on TikTok. I post everything on YouTube and Patreon and Instagram. Instagram only allows for shorter videos, so some of mine don't make it on there. But I try to post everywhere else. So, and I have a website that I try to keep updated with this type of information. So it's just the same thing, analyzingmormonism.com, and so yeah.
And you're one of the few people to do a Mormon Stories episode in under an hour. That's a real accomplishment.
Yeah.
Also, I want to just remind people, Julia is sort of picking up the baton that Mike left us with the LDS discussion series. The LDS discussion series is a much-loved series of over 50 episodes, digging into the Mormon Church's truth claims, trying to analyze them as objectively and as evidence-based as possible. And Julia, we're really excited that you've been picking up the mantle. You did 3 episodes on John C. Bennett that have been released now, and you've got one coming up. Should we announce that?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the problems of the witnesses. So the witnesses later,
The
yeah,
3 witnesses to the Book of Mormon and the 8 witnesses to the
yes,
book.
Yeah. So that's what that's about, is why there's problems there.
And so we're going to be scheduling that soon. And for those can check out the LDS discussion series on wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple or on Spotify. And then we've got a YouTube playlist of all those, because visuals help. It also helps to watch those in order. But if you want a really, really phenomenal series on Mormon Church's truth claims, please check out LDS discussions. And Julia, we're excited that you're taking that up.
Thanks.
Also, I'm going to note, just because people are mentioning it, yes, I did shave my mustache and beard. And no, I've never colored my freaking hair. So for those of you who want to, who accuse me of, not that there's anything wrong with coloring your hair, but for some reason my beard is more gray, but my hair stays brown. So maybe that's the most important thing we've talked about today. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Also, Julia, your camera is used up a little bit.
My camera's what?
Camera and microphone is quality has been improved.
Oh yeah. One of the listeners came and sent me all this equipment. So super nice camera, super nice lighting.
Yeah.
Still trying to figure out the background. Like I have swords, and they kind of look like they're jabbing into my head. So.
All right. Well, Julia, you're the best. We can't wait for your next stuff. I'll just thank. We got a super chat. Judd Westgates writes, please consider having Mirza Baradaran on the show. She's the Mormon author of The Color of Money, Black Banks, and The Racial Wealth Gap. Love the podcast. Judd Westgate, I have news for you. We've had Mirza Baradaran on Mormon Stories podcast twice. So go back and Google Mormon Stories and Mirza. She's phenomenal. I agree with that. But she's been on Mormon Stories podcast 2 times. I also want to just thank everyone for joining us today. We really do rely on your donations for support. So thanks to everyone who is a monthly donor to Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. Please become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org if you love this content and want to see it continue. We pay Julia for her scholarship. We pay our staff, and I'm paid. So please become supporters. We're also very grateful for everyone who donates through super chats. Please also like this episode. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel, whether you're watching live or not, and please share it with everyone. Julia, all the feedback's coming in. Everyone loves your work and is super grateful for it.
You guys are so sweet.
Yeah. And also thanks to Maven. Maven always does a great job moderating the comments, and she's posting links as we speak to the Mirza Baradaran episode. All right, Julia. Well, we look forward to more.
Yeah.
You come back. Will you please keep doing cool research?
Yeah, of course.
Mormon Stories and share it with us.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Thanks, Julia.
Okay, bye.
And thanks everyone for joining us today on Mormon Stories podcast. Please reach out to Tim Ballard and let him know his book needs to be taken off the shelves, that it grossly misrepresents history. And please tell all your family and friends that read Tim Ballard's books to read this book, to watch this episode so that they can get a sense for the poor scholarship that goes into Tim Ballard's books, or at least one of his books. You guys can decide whether that applies to the other ones as well. Anyway, please give us your feedback at mormonstories@gmail.com. We also read all the comments on these episodes. We love your feedback and suggestions. Be good to each other, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.